From age 15, Katie Berry was in and out of mental hospitals. But when she became violent, this woman with multiple personalities was about to be sentenced to an insane asylum in England. No one had ever been cured that was as far gone as Katie, but she found a supernatural power that made her normal. Next, on this edition of It's Supernatural.
Life after death experiences and angelic communications are on the increase. Terminally ill patients whom doctors have given no hope are unexplainably cured. People are being mysteriously protected from natural disasters. Sid Roth, your investigative reporter, examines this invisible world on It's Supernatural.
Hello, I'm Sid Roth, your investigative reporter. My guest, Katie Berry. When you look at her, it'll be hard to believe, but she was multiple personality with no hope of ever getting out of an institution. Katie, tell me about your background.
From the age of 3, I was abused. I was sexually and physically and emotionally abused by my father and by his father and by 3 other gentlemen. And this just led me to all kinds of problems through childhood, going into my teenage years, and I can't even comprehend the vastness of the abuse. It was horrific. It destroyed me. It destroyed my childhood. It destroyed my personality. It just destroyed everything about me, my family, everything.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have one sister.
Was she abused too?
No, she wasn't abused. And the part that we believe why I was so abused was I looked like my dad's eldest sister who was also abused. And so it's a generational thing, which it is in most families. It's something that the father does to somebody else, and it just continues and continues and continues until there's hope. So there is hope, but until the cycle gets broken. And so that's why my family believe that that's why I was singled out, which often happens also, because I looked so like her, and that was what happened to me and not my sister.
Well, didn't you reach a point? I mean, it started at 3 years old of age, which is, it's be candid with you, it's hard for me to comprehend that.
Yeah.
But wasn't there a point where you told someone or reached out for help?
No. In most abuse situations, you know, you hear a lot on the TV, on the radio, in magazines, that the victims, that the children, that people going through this are just too afraid, that there's too much to lose. There's just...
Well, let's don't talk about the people. What were you afraid of?
I was afraid that my sister and that my mom were going to be harmed, because that's what my dad used. He said that he would kill them, that he'd get rid of them, that if I ever mentioned it, that he would harm them. And on one instance, he actually did that with my sister. She was probably about 1 or 2 years old, and he sat her on a heater. And so it burned. It's strange. It's like a box, and it's a heater, and we used to have them in England, and he sat her on there, and it burnt the back of her leg quite severely. And that was to show me that he was serious, because I'd been deliberating or saying that I was going to tell people. And so that was a threat to me, and I believed it, and most children do. When you're a child, that's what you believe. You know, that's the person, that's your mentor, that's your father. And that's what I believed. And I had evidence to believe it too, you know, because he did that act. And I was like, yeah, he really is serious. And that's what held me in from being a child. I think I was about 5 when that happened. And it held me in fear for all those years. For another 10 years, I was abused.
How did he physically abuse you?
He would hit me. If it was physical, he would hit me. And he would, one time he threw me out of the vehicle, the car, while it was moving. You see, he was mad at me. He would just physically hit me around.
It's like, I know this happens, but it's hard to understand. It's supposed to be to someone else, not to you. I
know, that's what everybody thinks. That's what I always thought. That's what everybody thinks. Why is it happening to me? And you just get so destroyed. You just lose yourself. You're no longer a person. You just feel like an object, like an animal. You're just at the hands of someone else. You're just a victim, you know.
But you started hurting yourself.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? I mean, you were getting hurt enough.
Yeah. Oh, I was getting hurt. I was being abused. and it was regularly happening once a week on a Saturday. It was a ritual. It was
Why-
something that happened
Where
weekly.
was your mother on a Saturday?
My mom was working. She had a business.
So she didn't know?
No, she didn't know. My dad would take us from first thing in the morning. He would take me and sometimes my sister, but he would often drop her off. So it was usually myself, and he would take me, and his father was also abusing me, and 3 other men, and it was just a ritual. It was just a time where they abused me, and it's bizarre. You can't understand why a person would do that. I can't understand it.
But why were you injuring yourself?
Well, what I did was I broke my leg, and the first time it broke,
How
it
did
was
you
an
break your
accident.
leg?
The first
Okay.
time I fell down some steps when I was at school, and they took me to the hospital, so I got a lot of attention. It was positive attention. It was, "Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And from that, it never mended. My leg never mended. I had to keep having casts on it all the time, and nobody could understand. And what I used to do, I used to knock my leg, my ankle, against the side. We have a sofa, and it was wooden around the edges, and I would bash my ankle. Even in the cast, I could bash it hard enough, and the cast would cave in, and that's why it had to keep being redone.
Why?
Because I wanted the attention, because I wanted help. I wanted somebody to realize that I needed help.
Yeah,
And
but that would hurt you, I would
it
assume,
did,
just
and that's
pushing your leg.
another factor. I felt like I deserved the pain. I felt that I needed to be punished, that I felt so much shame, I felt dirty, I felt like I needed to be punished. And so I just continued to break it. When my leg was in the cast, the abuse stopped from my father, from the perpetrators, because they couldn't do anything, because I had to stay at home, or I wasn't mobile enough, you know. And so that was another factor, that it was just in my mind, I just had to keep my leg broken. I know it seems bizarre. It is bizarre, really.
It's bizarre, and yet I can have compassion and understand what you're talking about. It's like that was less of an evil than the evil you were facing.
Yeah.
Well, as you grew up, it had to affect you and your behavior. What was your life like as in the early teens?
In the early teens, I was doing well in school. I was very much an achiever. I wanted to succeed, because also that's a way of getting positive attention, positive reinforcement that you're loved and that you're doing well, you know, and it's esteeming. So I was doing real good. I was an achiever. And then when I was about 15, my father passed away. And then I started to bang my head.
It seems to me you should have rejoiced. Why were you banging your head?
Because of guilt, because I felt guilty, because I'd wished him dead. Because 2 or 3 days before, he'd really hurt me badly, and he was threatening to drown my cousin, and he had a head in the bathwater, and so I believed that he was going to do that. I just couldn't see an end. I tried so many ways to try and get help in my own way. It wasn't an outward plea, but it was all that I know that I could do to keep my family safe. In my mind, I believed that I could keep them safe if I kept my mouth quiet. But at the same time, I just wanted to be free. I just wanted a life. I just wanted to know what normal life was, to be me. And so what happened was I would start to bang my head, because I felt guilty because he died, and I wished him dead, and he died, you know. And so
I mean, it's really diabolical. It really is. Okay, so they observed your behavior, and what did they do?
At first, we had 3 psychiatrists come to our house, because they'd never seen this behavior before. They didn't know what to do, and they sent me to a psychiatric hospital, where I was institutionalized for 7 months, and I was just a teenager, but it was a special unit for teenagers. And from there, we went to behavioral psychologists, we went to psychiatrists, we went to teenage psychiatrists, we went all over the place. And nobody could understand why you're doing this. I was diagnosed with schizophrenia, I was diagnosed with manic depression, but nothing worked. And so in the unit there, they ended up sedating me for 2 weeks, just where I would just be asleep, because they believed in this treatment that if you slept, if you were numbed for a period, the behavior would break. And at the end of the period, when you start to wake up again, you don't know the behavior that you were doing, and so you're supposed to be fine. And so I was on that kind of therapy, where I was just sedated and just stayed in bed. I was woken up every half an hour to move and to be fed and to drink. And I was just, that was my existence. I was drugged heavily, I was sedated, and I was just taken to, like an experiment, to all these people to find out what was wrong, and nobody really knew.
Well, what happened next?
After that period of time, it was 7 months, and it was very intense. It was very bizarre behavior, very strong. The pattern didn't break. And my family, my cousins, asked me to go to a Christian meeting. There was a lady speaking by the name of Johnny Erickson, and I was not interested. I was very depressed, and I was suicidal, and I didn't see a way out. I just wasn't interested in anything, but I ended up going. And at that period, I listened to her talk, and she was talking about Jesus, and she was talking about freedom, and she was in a wheelchair, but she was happy, and she was like an angel. Her
You
face
wanted
was
what she
glowing.
had.
Yes. And I was like, wow, this is real for this lady. She's bound in a wheelchair, physically bound, but she's got something new, she's got something different. She got life there, you know, and her face was just shining and glowing. I've never seen a person like it before. And I was interested, I was captivated, and I wanted to know more. And she asked us to pray a prayer if we wanted to receive Jesus into our life, which I did, because I wanted to have what she had. And I knew about Jesus, but I never knew this kind of Jesus. I never knew Jesus that wasn't religion. I never knew anything else than death and than horrible things. And I saw in her a life, and I just wanted that. And so at that meeting, I prayed a prayer with her. And from then on, I started to get better for about 6 months. And then I had a relapse. But for 6 months, things were going a lot better.
You actually were studying for a new career.
Yes, I went into, straight after that, I went back to college because I'd left school, I hadn't been at school, and I went to college and I got all my basic exams for general education, and then I wanted to be a nurse because I felt that I had an understanding for people in psychiatric institutions, and so that was what I wanted to do. And so I went and I applied to be a psychiatric nurse, and I got approved. And I started a career as a psychiatric nurse for 4 years.
But why would you have a baby out of wedlock?
Because I wanted something to love, because I just believed that I wanted something to love, and I know so many people do. I know that when we're victims, we want something to love, we want someone or something to hold on to, and that's what I did.
And then you married the father,
Yes.
and it got
Worse, much worse.
What happened?
He was an alcoholic, and so the whole cycle was all over
it's like
again.
3
I
generations
know.
now. Was he beating you at all?
Yes, and he would burn me with cigarettes. He would throw me downstairs. He was an alcoholic. It was
Burn
crazy.
her with cigarettes. Throw her downstairs. How much can a human take? You're going to find out the most marvelous supernatural event. You're going to be rejoicing for the next 24 hours. Be right back.
We will return to It's Supernatural right after this.
This is Sid Roth, and I know you're on the edge of your seat. Katie Berry, multiple personality. She gets set free in a miraculous fashion. She goes to school, becomes a psychiatric nurse's attendant, and she meets a man, decides to have a baby because she wants love out of wedlock, then marries the man, turns out to be just like her father, just like her grandfather. He puts cigarettes on her, burns her, throws her downstairs. Well, you couldn't take that much longer. What happened to you?
What happened was gradually, slowly by slowly, I started to have a breakdown. I started to just lose control of my little world that I lived in, and everything just crashed. And my daughter was about 3 months old, and what happened was she got sick one day, and so she had to go to the doctors, and they couldn't find out what was wrong with her. So they sent me to the hospital, told me to take her to the hospital. And of course it was the same pattern as when I was a teenager. She was getting attention. Not only was she getting attention, I was getting attention. It was positive attention, it was good attention. And it was like I was so hungry for it. And so what happened was I kept saying she was sick. and I kept exaggerating symptoms. I kept making up
just to
stories
get attention.
to get attention. And she had to stay in the hospital. And so it meant I was moved from my home situation because I was a mother, and they asked you to stay there and to look good, to look like everything was in control, to look like that I was the perfect mom. I stayed there by her side. It got me out of my home situation, but it just created a whole nother mess that I had to deal with. And gradually, slowly, week by week, they realized that there wasn't really anything wrong with my daughter. And why was she there? What was happening? And she was taken away from my custody, and she was put into a foster placement.
Just because you put her in the hospital for no reason?
No, not just that. I also, I would clean her. I would keep cleaning her because I transferred my own feelings of dirtiness and shame and all those kind of feelings. I used to think that she was dirty. I used to think she needed changing all the time.
Just out of curiosity, did you wash your hands frequently
all
during
the time?
the day?
Yeah,
You
all the
did.
time. From
I've
being
heard
real
stories.
small, yeah, from being real small. I would just, it was ritual. I would just wash my hands all the time, and the skin would just be red raw because it would be so sore. But I would just keep washing them because I would feel so dirty, and it was just a compulsion.
So why were you doing this to your daughter?
Because I'd lost touch. At this stage, I didn't know reality. I'd lost touch with reality, and I believed that she was also contaminated by abuse, and I didn't like people to touch her. I didn't want people near her. Even my husband, I couldn't stand it if he was on his own with her, and I would just keep cleaning her and wiping her and washing her, and so she was marked because of this, and so that's another reason why they took her away. And she was out of our care for about 6 months. My husband was still my husband at that time, but neither one of us could see her, only for a supervised visit, and that visit was videotaped, and there were 2 people with us when we saw her. So
How
it was
did that make you
horrific.
feel?
Oh, it was awful. It was feeling violated, but it was horrible. It was just awful. I can't even begin to explain. It was horrific. It was the loss of losing her, and then it was all this pressure. People watching me, people accusing me, people saying things, diagnosing me, all these kind of things, all at the same time. And I just really lost it. I became very, very depressed. I would try and run my car off the road. I was just very depressed.
Sounds pretty hopeless to me.
Yes, it was. It was. We were sent. There was no hope, really. They tried. The psychiatrists, the psychologists, and social workers tried to assess myself with my daughter to see if there was any hope for reconciliation. And they decided that they couldn't work the situation out, and they called in a specialist. He came from Los Angeles. He has a clinic in England, and he was asked to assess us. And so we went into a hospital for, it was about 2 months to have an assessment. And they decided at that point that I would never get Chloe back, that she would never be returned to me, because I was multiple personality, and that I was also diagnosed with a condition called Munchausen syndrome, and that my daughter had it by proxy. And that for these kind of conditions, there's no hope. There's nothing, there's no drugs. There isn't a drug because it's a personality disorder. The only hope is intensive therapy over usually about 6 or 10 year period. And
but they were going to, shall I use the word sentence?
Yeah. They were going to put me into a hospital, into a psychiatric hospital for 6 years. And this wasn't just a doctor or a therapist. This was the court system in England. A magistrate court decided.
And what's the best they could do for you? Sedate
it was
you?
it was going to be for 6 years.
Oh.
And that it was called a psychotherapeutic environment, where I would receive intensive counseling, and they wouldn't even reassess me for 6 years. There was no reassessment period for 6 years.
But there was another option.
There was another option, that I could come to America to a clinic, and it was a Christian clinic. And that was available to me.
So which did you take?
I was resistant, but I decided I would come and I would see what this was about, because there was nothing else for me, and my family wanted me to come. And so I came to America, and I started to have counseling, I started to have prayer, I started to have ministry, which was very strong counseling and prayer together. It was combined. And things started to happen, major things started to happen. I began to get a lot of release. I heard voices, and the voices were stopping, and all the different personalities that I would change into gradually were stopping. It was more that I was becoming a whole person.
Well, why did you change into different personalities? Do you know?
Yeah, as a result of stress is the usual thing. Just any situation could be stressful, and so I would just flip from one personality to another. I would change clothes loads and loads of times a day. My eyes would change, my facial expressions would change, and I also had one of the personalities that I would change into was abusive, because it was like the perpetrator. It was as though my father had molded that part of me, and when I would split over to that personality, I would abuse myself, and I have scars on my hands. I would just rip the flesh until the bone was there, because I just hated myself so much. I just hated myself so much with a passion, and that was the only way I could destroy myself. And so bit by bit, those personalities, I didn't need them anymore, because I found Jesus was more dependable.
How long did it take for you to get whole?
It took me about 6 months, but it's an ongoing process. I live it daily.
6 months versus 6 years in an institution.
Yes.
Is there any way you would have come out of that institution like you are now?
No, there is no way, no way. I would still be in there. Sid, I would still have 1 more year before they would even reassess me. And there was no hope. There was no hope of anything anymore. It was just going to be locked up in a ward with people like myself.
You know, it says, to him who is forgiven much, they love much. I'm looking at you, and I have to tell you what's going on inside of me, Katie. I'm saying, this is not the person that I'm hearing a description of.
It isn't.
This is not the person that from 3 years of age was sexually and physically molested in a barbaric fashion. How can you look so happy? I mean, how can, don't tell me because you believe in Jesus. How can you?
Because my life has just changed. I'm not the same person, because I'm whole now. And my life, I have peace now for the first time. I have joy now for the first time, that I actually feel as me. It's like I experienced these feelings.
What do the doctors say? You went back to England.
Yeah, I went back to England, and they reassessed me. And they say that I'm the first case that's been diagnosed with MPD, Munchausen syndrome, that they know of, that has come out of it. That has
in history? In their history?
Yeah. That they don't understand it. They can't understand it.
But listen, if you had not gone through all the abuse you went through, I don't understand how you can look like you look. You're not just looking peaceful, you're beaming. You are beaming. Explain to why are you beaming?
Because my life has changed.
I mean, you're a light bulb. I'm serious,
it's
Katie.
Just changed. God has given me peace. He's given me joy. He has transformed me. I had no hope, Sid. I can't tell you. I had no hope. Nowhere. It wasn't just no hope down the road or down the next country or down the next city. Nowhere in this whole entire world could say, Katie Berry, there is hope for you. There is something to cure you from this illness, from this disorder, from being abused. There is forgiveness, that one day you're going to feel forgiveness. There was nowhere in this whole world. You can't imagine. Nowhere. And everything had been taken away from me. My daughter, my husband, my home, everything had been taken away from me. There was nowhere else for me to go, only the Lord. There was nowhere.
How long have you been free?
I've been free for 4 years.
And I understand there's a second man in your life. The first man in your life is the Lord.
Yes.
Who's that second man?
The second is my husband, and his name's Rick. Yeah, and I actually met him when I came over here for the first time, when I was in ministry, in the ministry home.
What do you two do now?
What we do is we were house parents for a home that has people who come to us who are emotionally disturbed, or who have been abused, or who are addicts. And we were running a home like that. And now we just stick with the administration. I do help the ministry with administration.
Would you do me a favor? Will you look right into the camera, look right into the camera, and tell people that there is no such thing as an impossible situation? Would you tell them that?
There is no situation that God cannot deal with. There is nothing that is too impossible for God. There is nowhere that can help you, only the Lord, and He can do it for you. And when you've got no hope, just reach out to God, because He's there. He's there, and He can transform you. He can change you. He can do miracles. He can make things that were nothing. He can make broken vessels into whole vessels. He can make you whole. And that's just a beautiful feeling that I know you can experience. And that it's the Lord, He can give you that experience. He wants you to be whole. He wants you to be free. He wants you to know peace. And He wants to give you joy that will just make you glow, that would just bless you.
You don't have to say a thing. Do you know she doesn't have to say a word? You just look at her face, and if you don't want what she has, you're deader than you think. I tell you right now, is your moment of destiny. Reach out, repent of your sins, ask Jesus to forgive you of your sins, be Lord of your life, live inside of you, read your Bible. This isn't religion. This is reality. This is power. This is strength. This is love. This is joy. This is hope. This is what you're after. This is now for you.